Hello and welcome to another episode of Solo Inter podcast. With me, as always, is Parmeshwar, and we have a special guest tonight. It's Nima from SempreInter.com. Hi, Nima. How is going?
Hi guys, how are you? Is everything good?
Yep, all good, all good. And weekend as usual. Tough match against Sassuolo, our bogey team. But we came through 10th win in a row. As usual, were you quite tensed in the end once Sassuolo came back, crawled back?
Yeah. The way that goal came about, it wasn't, the way Sassuolo scored that goal was what really annoyed me more than anything, than them actually scoring, because it came out of a bit of a bit of incompetence and unnecessary unforced errors by a couple of players, and Hakimi in particular, who had a really bad game throughout that game. And that's what kind of, usually when players make these mistakes that cost Inter, or in the past, at least the past decade in particular, when Inter players make those mistakes that cost Inter a goal, that's when the insecurity sends shockwaves through the defense. It creates insecurity, and it gets unnecessarily tense, and that's what it did. It got really tense. I mean, it would have been one thing if Sassuolo had scored because of brilliant attack, and Inter didn't, that's fine. But this was more due to, like, just incompetence and poor, lack of concentration and stuff like that. And that's why it got. I was annoyed, and so was everyone else. I mean, Handanovic was furious, and rightly so. And it sent shockwaves, and it made Inter a bit insecure. But they managed, that's the thing. I mean, Inter have managed to, same thing we saw against Napoli earlier on in the season, at the San Siro, when Inter, towards the end, where they counted on Handanovic making these crazy saves, which he did. He was brilliant in that game. It was, you see how Inter, how Inter ride through these situations. They go through these difficult situations, and that's what a big team has to do. I mean, Antonio Conte speaks, or in Italy, you speak about this notion of knowing when to suffer and how to suffer when you suffer. That's what he's referring to, that particular instance. That's how you should handle these situations. When you're in difficulty in a game, how do you handle it? When do you, how do you approach it, and stuff like that? And Inter have done really well after Christmas in these situations, but minor, a few lapses of concentration here and there, such as the Sampdoria game, which they lost, and also the Sassuolo game, when they scored. That is.
But also there was one thing I've seen with Inter they have been doing this season is like whenever it's just back three of Skriniar, Bastoni, and De Vrij, it's all good. It's all fine. They know how to manage it. But once we have like usually it's Brozovic who comes back to help, or Perisic or Young or Darmian, they come to help. There is always chaos when there is like 4 or 5 people in the box. Suddenly it's like no one knows whom to cover, whom to defend, and that's how we are leaking goals. Like, do you feel that whenever it's just back three, we are fine, but as soon as there are more players involved in the box, we tumble over each other. We just don't know what to do anymore.
No, I don't think that's the issue. I think actually Darmian did really well. And also Inter have, it's a three-man defense on paper, but when Inter attack, it's, as Antonio Conte brilliantly showed, in on his Instagram post, it becomes a 4-2-4. It can become a 3-4-3. It can become a 3-4-2, and it's a very fluid team when attacking, and also defensively. So I don't think that's the issue. The issue is when these players who are so drilled by Conte what to do, when to do, and he prepares his team so well on what to do, when to do, and how to do it in different situations. When they don't do what they're supposed to do, and they make these unforced errors, it's like the system almost freezes, and they're like, it becomes like a syntax error, if you speak computer language. Like they tend to not they tend to panic, and in the past you've seen that usually results in a couple of goals being conceded, but that's not the case anymore. They ride the storm out. Some of it you can say is dumb luck, but it's not dumb luck when it consistently happens. That's a growth in not just mentality, but also in approach and preparation, and also knowing how to handle difficult situations when you're encountering them and when you find yourself in these difficult situations. Um, and that's all on Conte. He's really, it's not just people throw, the people use the term mentality without even knowing what it means, a lot of the time. And it's not, mentality is how you approach situations and difficult situations in games and in-game situations and all of that. And mentality is having, being able to go into these situations and dealing with them well. But a lot of it is also preparation, and a lot of it is also competence and being used to it, and having a coach that can tie the whole thing together. And that's what Conte has done with Inter since after Christmas. It's been phenomenally impressive, because let's remember, where Inter were in November. Inter were in a very bad place in November. Inter were not finished last in their Champions League group stage for the first time in the club's history. They were not. They were barely in the top four. The form in the league it looked horrible when they played. And it all kind of changed in the game against Sassuolo, where they played the same way then as they did now, relying on defensive solidity to build confidence. And from there on, they've gone forward to scoring goals, because remember how the season started. Conte and Inter they played some sort of cheap version or some expensive version of Atalanta football, which does not suit this team at all, and Inter shouldn't be playing like that at all anyway. They've they don't have the players to play like that. So what Conte did when he realized that it doesn't work was that he adapted to the players he has at hand. He adapted. He understood that Christian Eriksen and Ivan Perisic are not going anywhere. They're staying, and he needs to get them into the project. And also what he did, which I think is probably the most impressive feat, is that he got them not to just accept and feel part of the project, but he got them not to just accept the role, the new role that they're playing, but he also got them to embrace it wholeheartedly, making themselves available and working hard to understand what it takes to play in this new role that they've not played in before. And that's impressive. That's man management skills that Conte has, when he's in this mood. And also, I think the fact that Kolarov and Arturo Vidal turning out to be such unmitigated disasters was good for Antonio Conte, because they were his signings. These are players that he wanted, not just because, people can blame the financial situation as much as they like, but the fact of the matter is that Antonio Conte wanted Kolarov and Vidal from the very first day he came to the club, and now he got them, and they turned out to be liabilities and not, didn't bring anything to the table. And that made him kind of forced to face that fact that, okay, well, I also made a mistake. I got Barella and Lukaku and Ashraf Hakimi right, but I also got these two horribly wrong. So that creates a sort of situation where you have to be humble, and back and to make the effort, and which he has done. I think so. It's a two-way street. I mean, I always say no one, everyone can do with a slice of humble pie. Everyone, including Antonio Conte, and this has been good for him.
Yeah, and for the Sassuolo game, I mean, it feels like whenever Lukaku is like, he will score every game. I mean, that's kind of like a given now. And initially, when Hakimi had a chance, which he just squandered, I feel like nowadays he's concentrating more on trying to get goals rather than assisting, because initially when he was there, he was brilliant. But now I feel he's becoming too complacent, and it's getting frustrating to watch him at times. But how do you think like Inter generally played against Sassuolo? Like, do you think the referee also was good, because there were penalty calls on both sides which he got wrong?
Well, I mean, I think it's a couple of separate things there to unpack. The Hakimi thing is, look, he's out of form. Players can be out of form. That's normal. That's a normal part of life in football. Players are in form and then they're out of form. And young players, when they're out of form, the drop off in their performances is much bigger than more experienced players who go on autopilot when they're out of form. And that's what you have with Hakimi. We have to remember, he's not a very old guy. He doesn't have a lot of experience. And and this is bound to happen. But at the same time, that's something that they will work through, and he will learn from that. So I'm not too worried, although it is very frustrating to watch. But I don't think it's complacency. I think it's more frustration and not being able to channel that frustration in the proper way. As for the referee, look, when it comes to refereeing decisions, I think that they're consistent. Irati was consistent in how he adjudicated every single one of those situations, and even some of the situations that were not that happened in the middle of the pitch. He was completely consistent. He didn't take a very rigid approach to an interpretation to the rule book, and he did so throughout the 90 minutes. So you can't, that's one side of it. The other side is there's absolutely a case to be argued that both teams should have had at least one penalty. So so it depends on what point you take and what perspective you have. As for how Inter played, Inter have played in so many different ways. The game against Sassuolo has to be seen. You can't turn one game into a pattern of behavior or a pattern of performances because it's not there. It literally is not there. It's an isolated game. If Inter had continued for 15 games having 30% possession and winning by the odd goal, then fine. But it's not there. The data doesn't back that up. It's just one game, and it's a game where Inter wanted to play to their strengths and to Sassuolo's weaknesses, and they did that. Ball possession for the sake of ball possession is ridiculous. It's about what you do with the ball when you have it. And I think, and if you look at how Inter scored their goals, especially the first one, that's not a team that sits on the back foot and waits for mistake. That's a team with a clear identity of how to attack, how to create chances, how to play the ball. It has a clear identity. Same thing with the second goal. Inter have an identity and they know how to play. It's just that against Sassuolo, that given that it's a week where they're playing 3 games and it was on the back of a international break that caused a lot of problems. There's no issue here at all, not for me anyway. And also drawing against Sassuolo is perfectly okay. They're a good team, Sassuolo. And that's so I don't have an issue. But then you have a broader issue here with ball possession and whether or not ball possession in and of itself equals attractive football. Well, again, attractiveness is beauty lay in the eye of the beholder. There's no objective truth that ball possession is automatically beautiful. That's nonsense. No one can say that. There's nothing. That's not an objective truth. That's a personal opinion, and everyone is entitled to their opinions. But you can't argue that Inter play whatever football they play, that it's ugly. Well, that's nonsense because they've scored the most goals in the Serie A. They have scored more goals than Man City in the Premier League, and the Man City have played more games than Inter. So how can they both be boring and score a lot of goals? I don't understand. There's no logic to that argument, or that kind of line of reasoning. It's lazy, to be honest. In my opinion, that's just lazy reasoning, and it's reactionary and doesn't have any root in reality. Because if you look at these 10 games, Inter mopped the floor with Juventus. Inter destroyed Milan. Inter were dominant against a very good Lazio side. Same thing against Atalanta. They've beaten all these teams in these games as well. They did not sit on the back foot and expect someone to they didn't play like park the bus against any of these teams. They went out and took the game to them and won those games deservedly, and probably should have won 5-6-0 against Milan and Juve. They dominated those games. So it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, any of it. So it just becomes silly, in my opinion. So it's it's an impressive win. It's an impressive string of results. 10 wins in a row is very impressive, no matter how way you cut it, especially when you look at how Inter play against the top teams who I've just mentioned. So I don't understand. It's when you reach this point of the season, when it's and if you take into consideration everything Inter have been through this season and the history that Inter have not won jack for 10 years, nothing for 10 years, they've not won anything. They've not been close to winning anything except for the Europa League, a few months ago, barely 8 months ago. Then this notion that Inter are somehow obliged to play some sort of subjective interpretation of attractive football is utter nonsense. Inter's objective is to win, is to start a winning cycle. That's what Inter is supposed to do. Antonio Conte was brought in to win, and they've done so by scoring the most goals and winning 10 goals in becoming the first team since Arrigo Sacchi's fantastic Milan squad in starting the second half of the season. I mean, from match 20 and onwards, they've won every single game. No one's done that in the era of the three-point era. Last team to do that was Arrigo Sacchi and his Milan. So no matter how you look at it, this criticism is ridiculous. It doesn't stand up to any scrutiny.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you over there. Like, beautiful football is like depends on who you ask. Because for me, like Barella being physical in the midfield is beautiful to watch. Like the tackles defenders do is beautiful to watch. It just doesn't mean like dribbling past 10 players is not the only thing that's beautiful. A good defense is also beautiful to watch. Good
I mean,
tackles.
again, that's subjective. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's all subjective. Beauty is subjective. And it's one thing if Inter barely scored a goal a game, but 68 goals, is it, in 29 games?
Yeah.
I mean, what? 68 goals in 29 games is a very good stat. That's, like I say, it's better than Man City, and no one accuses Man City of playing ugly football. So again, it doesn't make any sense. The only team in Europe's top 5 leagues that have scored more than Inter is Bayern Munich. So it doesn't make sense. It literally makes no sense.
Yeah. Parmeshwar, coming to you, like, what were your thoughts on the match? How do you think the match went?
First of all, thanks for coming on, Nima. We really appreciate it. And I mean, everything Nima said, I echo, because I've seen this notion going on everywhere, Inter don't play beautiful football, and everyone seems to be very critical of Conte for some reason. But then so Nima added certain stats, and I just want to add to it, for the last 11 matches, we have not trailed in a single one of those games. Every other team has, Atalanta has, Juventus have, Napoli and Milan. So I think people tend to fail to see these side of things, that when teams don't concede, it's, I guess, mainly people think that having more possession is beautiful, but then as Nima said, if you can't do anything with it, what's the point? And that's what I think Sassuolo couldn't do much with it. People might think, if they look at the stats, that Sassuolo actually dominated the match, but it was actually into off the ball, with their shape and compactness, as Matteo Darmian said, Lautaro said, Gagliardini said, it was the compactness, and that is how we dominated the match off the ball. I think people fail to see those things, and my general thoughts on the match are the same as Nima, because I think Conte's teams are now showing a clear identity, as he said, the structure at the back, defending with multiple men. And I think that's what you need, because, Sassuolo are not an easy team to play. We haven't beaten them at home for 7 years. I mean,
Exactly.
up until yesterday, of course. And I mean, we all know De Zerbi's team, regardless of the absentees they have, of course, they didn't have Locatelli, Berardi, Caputo, but they still are a dangerous team. They have talents like Raspadori, Boga. So it was always going to be a tough game. And why would we, go out of our way to, try and play like Atalanta do and just give Sassuolo the advantage and, play it into their hands? It makes no sense. And we saw that in the earlier part of the season, as Nima said, we were leaking goals left, right, and center. I don't think anyone can forget that first match against Fiorentina. It was absolute bonkers. I mean, I don't know how we won that. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think I'm very satisfied with the performance, Gotham, and especially the fact that, Darmian stepped into that role and did a fantastic job. I mean, we didn't have to see Kolarov, so that's a big positive. And of course, he wasn't available either. But yeah, I'm just satisfied with the performance, because we need the wins at this point. And as Nima said, for a club that hasn't won anything in the last 11 or 10 years, 11 years, we have to play to win. Everything else is secondary. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I remember quote tweeting your thread, Nima, yesterday. That this is how it is. It's about perspective, right? It's about perspective of what is beautiful. I mean, if certain people think that a possession-based game is beautiful, it's fine. But then, at the same time, as you said, Inter are more known for their catenaccio-based game. With Trapattoni, Mourinho, So I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's people can have their opinions, but I think at the end of the day, what matters is that we got the job done, and yeah, that's what we need to continue doing, in the remaining matches as well.
I mean, one thing is, I mean, I understand. I mean, there's no doubt that this Inter can develop how they play in Europe. I don't think anyone would deny that. But to say that, I mean, I saw someone tweet at me. I can't remember who it was, saying, "Yeah, but we're not, playing like this. We'll never win the Champions League." Inter won't win the Champions League if they play like Atalanta either. It's a ridiculous notion to even suggest that. What are you talking about? As if the only difference standing between Inter and the Champions League trophy is possession football. No, you need to invest heavily in this squad if you're going to win the Champions League.
Exactly.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, it's not the approach. And again, this is what people talk about mentality, and they don't know what they're talking about, because there's no such thing. It's not mentality has nothing, it's a quality issue. Inter don't have the players to play like that. And if you want to play like that, well, then you have to invest in your squad. And the Juventus are the richest club in Italy, and they're the 10th richest club in Europe. These Serie A clubs can't compete with the Premier League and the La Liga teams when it comes in wages, and so they won't get the best technical players, and so they have to do with what they've got and maybe take a more pragmatic approach. It's as simple as that, and that's just a reality. But that doesn't mean that Inter are playing some sort of prehistoric Mazzarri park the bus. That's just not true. It's just not true. The issue is, I mean, that's simply not true, because look, against in the Champions League, they had more ball possession, but they couldn't create anything because they failed to because of poor tactical choices and lineups and individual errors, for whatever reason it is. So of course there's room for improvement. There's no one's denying that. But this notion, when you haven't won anything for a decade, and all of a sudden you're like, well, we shouldn't win the Scudetto playing like this because we can't win the Champions League. That's like, that's not rooted in reality, because Inter wouldn't win the Champions League even if they played sideways for 90 minutes. Like, it doesn't matter. They're just not good enough to win the Champions League, and that's just the hard truth.
Yeah, and coming to the financial situation now, like there was a question on Twitter from William Sona. He's like, what do you make of the financial situation? Like, now that Zhang is back, and the news is like he doesn't want to sell. He just wants another minority owner in the club.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's pretty much been Suning's stance on this, that they want. I mean, they value Inter to 1 billion euros, and if someone wants to pay that, they'll gladly sell. But no one wants to pay that. So for them, it's like, sure, we don't want to sell, but if you want to buy it, then pay us what we want. What they're looking for is investors to guide through this difficult period, so that they can come out the other side of the pandemic, if and when that ever happens. So because they believe in the project, and the fight, that they can bring in a new sponsor, and all the sponsors they've got can start paying what they're supposed to, and et cetera, and then the match day revenue and everything else with it. I mean, we all know this global situation of the economy. When no one's consuming anything and everyone's sitting at home and working from home and everything, it has a knock-on effect. So, and Suning make their money in retail and real estate, and those are two, those are two, you're not making money in retail, and when everyone's at home, and struggling to pay their rent, that also puts it into difficulty. So for them, they're in a difficult place because they have liquidity issues. And they also have debt that needs to be paid. And so the Chinese government have come on board, and they're not going to stand for them putting money in Inter, because football is a non-essential business for them. And then you have the geopolitical issue where China is, where the West and especially the US has started a trade war with China, which means that they want to prevent capital leaving China in the first place, unless it's a non-essential business, and football is a luxury. It's as simple as that. So it's going to come to a breaking point at some point where Suning will have to decide what to do. But I think Inter winning the Scudetto will definitely help them to attract more sponsors and more everybody wants to work with a winner. It's easier to bring in an investor when you're winning than if you're fighting for fourth or third place. It's as simple as that. And I think this team, there's so much more you can do. But then again, the situation needs to be resolved because you have to start planning next season as soon as possible. They have to get these contract extensions sorted. They have to start bringing in players. They have to start planning for next season. They can't just leave it until the end. I think what everyone is focusing now is to secure the Scudetto, and then you can start delivering. But then again, you also have to know, planning forward, planning for the future. But we also have to remember that Suning like to keep their cards very close to their chest. They don't leak things. They're not like Tohir. They're not like Moratti. They're very similar to Agnelli in that fact that people can speculate all they want, but they don't leak, and they have their plan and they stick to it, and then they just execute it, and they don't talk whilst they're doing it. That's what we've learned from Suning so far.
Yeah, I mean, Gautam asked you about the financial situation, and since we're talking general things, I had a question from one of our listeners, Dieter Van Gogh. He wants to ask, of course, since you brought up contract renewals about Lautaro Martinez and everyone, and there's news about many contract renewals happening, right? Lautaro Martinez, Bastoni, Barella, many of them. But his question was a bit more personal for you, as in who's your favorite Inter player as of now from the current squad in the last 5 years, and do you think Romelu Lukaku is the best Inter player in the last 5 years or even more? What's your take on that?
Who my favorite Inter player is?
Yeah,
right
from
now?
the current squad.
It's probably, I have to say Barella. I think his intelligence, it's because he's such a complete midfielder. He can do so many things. He's got craft and vision, but he's also very physical. He's got a good shot on him. He's got tenacity. His movement is great. He never stops running. He's really quick. Now I think he's a complete midfielder, and as such, I really like. He's my favorite player, I'd say. As for Lukaku, he's probably the best player. I'd make the point that he's probably the best player in the Serie A right now.
Yeah.
This season, he's unbelievable. The steps that he's taken, the development that he's made. This season in particular, last season was amazing, but this season is other level. He's unstoppable. He has everything. He's strong. He's fast. He's actually very technical. He's great in link-up play. His first touch is not as bad as people say. All these things that people said about them was nonsense. His link-up play is excellent. He's been imperative for Inter in that. His first touch is great because that's part of the link-up play. He's fast as hell. He can outrun anyone. He's as strong as a Hulk. And he's lethal in front of goal. He barely misses. He's like a machine. It takes a little while for him to get going, but once he's up and running, he's just unstoppable. So yes, I'd say he's not just. I'd say he's the best player in the Serie A this season. Honestly, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and
also along those. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, there's also one other question,
Okay,
which when did Inter's season turn around? Do you think it was the match against Sassuolo, the first leg?
I think it started kind of, the foundations lay there. But for me, the win against Napoli was really the turning point, because that was a game where that was destined for a goalless draw. But then the penalty and Insigne losing his mind changed everything. I'm not big on these, populist, that was the turning point kind of thing. But for me, it's several different points that gives you the momentum and push for you to change and they can give you a mental push to go forward. And I think that was one of the decisive games, was that Napoli win. It was very important because Napoli were doing pretty well back then, and Inter were struggling in that game, but they managed to win it, and they managed to not concede a goal, and they did so thanks to a goalkeeper who was severely criticized, pulling off absolutely fantastic saves. These kind of things create an environment and energy that you can build from. And I think that was a very defining moment. I wouldn't say it was the defining moment, but it was definitely one of the defining moments.
Also, I had a question, Nima. Since you spoke of the turning point, I know, of course, when Conte was first signed, you weren't the biggest fan, and of course, many people weren't the biggest fan of Antonio Conte. And of course, the reasons are justified and out there, and we have seen it. But right now, there has been some news of him potentially extending his contract, and staying beyond his 3-year tenure. So what do you make of it? Are you all for it, given that how he's turned around his time at Inter? And of course, yes, he doesn't have the best of Champions League records, but these things can always change. What do you make of it? And of course, he's going to ask for better players. We know that regardless of the financial situation, he has that tendency. So along those lines, Jacobs Dunga also had a question that, considering all of his track record and everything, do you think he can elevate Inter's level and actually make them someone who can compete in the Champions League, better than what they actually do currently? Maybe take them to the quarterfinal or even semi-final. Do you think Conte has that? And
Oh,
do you think?
oh,
Do you think? And sorry, just to finish it off, do you think we should extend his contract beyond his 3-year tenure?
starting with the Champions League question, there's no doubt in my mind that the way that because Conte's football has changed. He's not the intensity, to use as young people say, intensity merchant. He's not a grinta merchant anymore. He's not. His football is not the same as it was at Juve, and not the same as it was in Chelsea even. It's much more, this vertical football that he talks about is a very progressive and very modern approach. It's a very modern, it's an updated and modern football kind of brand of football that I think that I think can be very successful. Absolutely. And especially in Europe, because of the way that he builds these attacks, and especially now that he's got a midfield, because the midfield the problem with Inter has always been that when or Italian teams in general has been in Europe, that they are still living in an era where midfielders are brought in to do one thing. You have the ball winning midfielder, you have the creative midfielder, you have the midfielder who runs for two. That's not how it works in modern football. Your midfielders have to be able to do at least two or three things all at once. They have to be defensively sound. They have to be able to create. They have to be able to run. They have to be able to tackle. They have to be able to be ball winning. They have to do all of these things at once. And with Eriksen's adapting to that role as a Mezzala, and Brozovic and Barella, if you bring in a Rodrigo de Paul, and together with Stefano Sensi, if you can get him to adapt as well, and if Vecino stays, then yes, I think that this Inter as it is, can go to a quarterfinal, second round of the Champions League, undoubtedly, no doubt in my mind. But then you have to get rid of, then the Arturo Vidals have to go, because there's no place for them in modern football anymore, because he's a grinta merchant, to use the kids lingo. That kind of football is, those kind of footballers are not, that's not the kind of football that the midfield that big clubs need, and to go through to the quarterfinals and semi-finals of Champions Leagues. You need to have much more versatility in your midfielders. As for Antonio Conte, it would be suicide for him and for Inter to part ways this summer. It would be crazy, because the squad is built for him and he's built for it. It would be silly. And I think the fact that his stock is not too high after what happened at Chelsea, so I don't think he's too popular in the Premier League. I don't see him. He's not. Who else would take him in Italy? No one. And where would he go? Spain? Where? Real Madrid and Barcelona? I don't think so. Would he go to PSG? But they just hired Pochettino. So I think that this is why it's like no one. Everything is going well. Inter and Conte found a balance with each other. They know him. He knows them. They've ironed out all this kind of trouble that was. He knows how the club works. The club knows how he works. They found a common ground somewhere in the middle. And the players absolutely will die for this guy. And when you have that, then it would be suicide to change. It would be crazy. It would be absolutely, mental to do something like that. And so I think, I don't think that he will go into, I don't think he and Inter want to go into a season where he's only got 12 months left on his contract. I think they will sit down after the season is over. They will talk about the long-term project. Is there a long-term project? What is it? What are the terms? And based on that, they will make a decision. Shall we continue beyond this season or not? And it's not just a financial issue, because I don't see Conte leaving in the summer, because he's going into his last year, and that will see him earn 13.5 million net. He'll get a wage increase. He's not walking away from that money in this economic climate because no one's paying him that. So I think that works in Inter's favor. Having said that, he will also say, look, this past year, you've all had your troubles. I've delivered. I've done the absolute best I can with this squad, with the resources available to me. I want to know what goes on, what we'll do from here on now. What can we do? What, realistically, what are the options? Can we invest? Can we get rid of these players? Who do we bring in? I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. And that also ties in together with the ownership situation. Now, the financial fair play is dead. It's over. It's gone. And I doubt it will return, at least not in this form, because it's, it is what it is. The clubs have to do what they have to do to survive. You can't demand, when they can't even raise any revenue in match day, you can't demand that they should stand on their own. You need the owners to invest. Otherwise, football will go bankrupt. Simple as that. So that's dead. That, does that mean that the richest owners will bankroll the clubs? Some instances, yes. Will Suning be able to? No, because of what we've already discussed. So you need to find a balance here between what you can and you can't do. But I can't imagine that Conte will accept, and I don't think it's good for Inter, and I don't think he should accept another summer of the Kolarovs and the Vidals. That's not going forward. That's going backward. Now, having said that, I think this summer we'll see Ranocchia leave, Ashley Young leave because their contracts are going to expire. I think you'll see contract extensions for D'Ambrosio, Lautaro, Barella, Bastoni, De Vrij, either and Perisic. Those are conversations that need to be had. Do you cash in on them or do you extend them? And if you extend them, what are the financial terms? Because I think those two players are players that could leave if Inter receive a good offer for them, or if Inter and the player decide that now is time to part ways. But I mean, that's just what I think, because of their age and where they are, and also the salary that they command at that age, because older players command a higher salary. And I think Kolarov and Vidal will probably leave as well. I think it's turned out that to not be so good. Kolarov for sure. I think Darmian will stay because I think Darmian's been very good. He's turned out to be a very new, very good player, useful squad player. As for the rest, Inter have to bring in a new goalkeeper. Radu needs to leave. Pinamonti is not making anyone happy, least of all himself, just sitting on the bench. So yeah, there's quite a bit that they need to do. I mean, if Lazaro comes in, then they won't be able to get Di Marco back unless Perisic leaves. It's a lot of stuff like that. But that conversation needs to be had. Who stays, who goes, and what margins are there financially to improve, to continue to have a project. Because I don't think it's fair on anyone, Inter or the players or Conte, to go through another season of this, of another summer of the Vidals and it's just a waste of money. It's just a waste of time and money. I think those conversations will be had, and I think if Suning stay, they will have to, because there's no point for them staying either unless they have a plan to take this forward. So we'll have to wait and see. And as I said, Suning don't talk until there's something to say, until the dotted line has been signed. So we don't know anything. We'll have to wait until when Steven returns to Milan to see what the idea is.
Yeah, and I think people tend to forget that we didn't have a preseason this year.
No.
And next year, once and with Eriksen being in the starting now, he has got Conte's confidence, and we have a complete preseason. I think we'll be even more dominant next year, because this year at the first half, even the formation wasn't 3-5-2. He was experimenting with formation. Eriksen was sidelined, and once it was like the formation is set up, the team is much more cohesive now. And once we have a full preseason under our belt, I think we'll be even more better next season.
I think both yes and no, but in order to improve, to go further in Europe and to continue to win the Scudetto again, there needs to be investment. There needs to be. It doesn't need a lot of investment. You need a backup striker to Lukaku. Get rid of Pinamonti. You need to get rid of Vidal, Kolarov, Ranocchia, Ashley Young, and you need to replace these players um, with good alternatives. And then you have the midfield. What do you? Then you have some decisions to make in the midfield. What do you do with Stefano Sensi? What do you do with Matias Vecino? Do you continue with them or do you not? Can you bring in Rodrigo de Paul, who I think would be perfect? Because again, you need to have options. You can't have 15 players and compete on three fronts. Inter need to have need to have 18 to 22 players of almost the same quality so that they can compete on several fronts. And that's where the key lies, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you, Nima, because in order to move forward into the next season, you need to have certainty, and of course, Conte will ask for that. And there are a lot of problems to solve, but I think those will be done at the end of the season because we all know Suning work efficiently, and I think after that meeting that happened after the Atalanta match and everything, I think Conte may be a bit more level-headed now as well. We never know, but I'm assuming he is. I
No,
guess.
I think so because I think, as I said, I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
his signings failed. I mean, he got it
Yeah.
so right with
Yeah.
Barella and Lukaku, but he got it so wrong with Vidal and Kolarov.
Vidal. Yeah.
And I think and also the financial situation that he's understood that the pandemic is real, and everyone is suffering from it financially, and that kind of creates a different working environment. So I think, but I don't think that he will accept another season of this, and I don't think and I don't think he should, and I don't think anyone should, because you need to improve. If you don't improve, you stagnate. And Inter one Scudetto in 10 years doesn't give you any reason to go all arrogant and stagnate and think we're fine as we are. Like, no. It's just as simple as that. So Inter need so they need to develop, and I think they will. I think Suning will have a plan in place when the time is right.
Yeah, so I think that was about all things Inter in general. But now we move to preview the Cagliari match, which is of course on Sunday, and it's an early kickoff. And I just wanted to dive straight into it. Cagliari have been horrible this season. They sit 18th in the table, only 5 wins, and when Di Francesco was the coach, he only had 3 wins. Nima, I want to ask you to begin with, where did it all go wrong with Eusebio Di Francesco? He had that spell at Roma, the Champions League thing, and since then he's fallen off the map completely. He's been horrible, and it's not that Cagliari have a bad squad. They have some pretty decent players in there if you look at it. Giovanni Simeone, Joao Pedro. I mean, I don't want to say no, Nainggolan is that good, but yeah, I mean, they're not that bad. So what do you think happened with him? Like, I didn't expect them to be battling it out for relegation.
Well, what happened was that Eusebio Di Francesco was a bad appointment. He's simply not good enough. He's, what he did at Roma, it wasn't a good job. He didn't do a good job at Roma. All of if you look at the squad he had, he actually really rather failed. The only good thing he did was that semi-final in the Champions League. And that's been the kind of thing that's kind of carried everything else. But at the end of the day, that's not, that Barcelona game is where everything, you can have these crazy games, but overall it was a horrible tenure under him, and Roma stagnated under him and under Monchi and all of that, everything that happened. So I think he's just not good enough, and I think things looked better than what they were at Sassuolo. And then then it kind of fell apart at Roma, and it continued falling apart at Cagliari, and that's why they find themselves where they are. They really bet on the wrong horse. He's not a coach that's good enough for the Serie A, in my opinion. Honestly, not. And I think that's where it went wrong. The squad is more than good enough to be in the Serie A. It's a mid-table Serie A squad team.
Exactly.
And it's going to be difficult. So I think that it's going to be so tight for them to see if they make it or not.
Just before I delve into a few key players of this, do you think Semplici is the right man to keep them up? Because he won the first 2 games, but then again he's back on a losing run. So what do you think of that? He switched to a 3-5-2. Do you think he can keep them up?
I think it's going to be difficult. I think it's impossible to say who's going to go down because it's so tight down there. But I'd rather be Torino than Cagliari. If I were to today, I'd rather be Torino than Cagliari. So we'll have to wait and see, but it's going to be tight. It's going to be really, really tight. And it looks like Benevento and Spezia are going to stay up. So
Yeah.
that is, Parma doesn't look good. And then one of Torino and Cagliari. I prefer
Yeah.
Torino. I don't want either one of them going down, and I don't want Parma going down either, because
Mm.
these are teams that should be in the Serie A,
Yeah.
and
And
they have the infrastructure to be in the Serie A.
yeah.
But it's all on them. Bad
Mm.
decisions. Why
Bad
not continue
decisions.
with the at Parma? Why the hell would you bring in Di Francesco, give him a
Yeah.
contract extension, then sack him 2 weeks later?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's mental.
Yeah. And yeah, you said that about Di Francesco. I mean, even I didn't understand how they extended him to 2024 and then just got rid of him. But then when I look at certain players of theirs, as you said, they're not a bad team. They have players like Joao Pedro, who already has, if I'm not wrong, like 15 goals this season, and he's already surpassed his tally. Oh, sorry, 13 goals, and he's surpassed his tally from last season. What do you make of him? How do you think he can cause our defense problems? Because of course we'll have Bastoni, Skriniar, and De Vrij. But do you think he'll be much of a threat or not?
Oh yeah, I think they can, because he runs
Hmm.
a lot. He's very
Hmm.
intelligent, and
Hmm.
his timing is great, and he
Hmm.
knows, he gets the timing right of when to finish, and he runs into situations
Hmm.
at the right time, with,
Hmm.
with millimeter precision. I think they're a team to watch out for
Hmm.
sure. They can cause you
Hmm.
problems, but Inter need to Inter need to watch out. It's as simple as
Hmm.
that. Inter need to watch
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and with that being said, of course we have two ex players in their squad. One is Diego Godin and one is Dengolan. I guess one of them, particularly Godin, wasn't really fussed about leaving. He just didn't understand. I think he understood the decision more than anything, and he wished us luck and everything. But Nangolan, I mean, everyone expected this guy to be so, like, be back in form for us, be important for us. I think everyone wanted that. But what do you think is wrong with? What do you think went wrong? Because many people think he didn't show the right commitment. Is that it, or do you think he just wanted to return to Cagliari very badly?
No, I think it's an issue that Raja Nainggolan could have been so much better, could have had so
Hmm.
much of a better career if he was a little bit more professional with
Hmm.
his life on the side. And I mean, the guy isn't, and
Hmm.
he actively chose not to live the way you need to live on the
Yeah.
side.
Hmm.
And when you reach 30, the smoking and drinking catches up with you, and you can't
Yeah.
combine smoking and drinking whilst being an elite athlete. It's just
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
simple.
Hmm.
If you can make up for it when you're 20s, you can't do that in your 30s. It's just a fact of life, and I think
Yeah.
and Antonio Conte did not want that correctly anywhere near his team, because it
Hmm.
disrupts the
Hmm.
others, and so he got
Hmm.
rid of him. That was a
Hmm.
bad decision. I mean, I was against that signing at the time, because I thought he was past his best, but
Hmm.
at the same time,
Hmm.
Spalletti wanted him, and Spalletti
Yeah.
deserved to get what he
Yeah.
wanted for getting
Hmm.
into to this Champions
Hmm.
League. It is what it is. You win some, you lose some.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, that was Cagliari. We looked at how they could potentially line up. But do you think, just to quickly cap off, how do you think we should take it to them? Do we have the same approach like we had against Sassuolo, or do we
No,
go out like on an aggressive front? What do you think?
I think they're going to go out there and try to dominate, because their midfield
Hmm.
is not good enough
Yeah.
to do what Sassuolo do. I think
Hmm.
Inter will play much more aggressive. I think Inter will
Hmm.
push much more further up the pitch. I think Inter
Hmm.
will press much more further, and then of course that's how they'll start the game. But I don't think that's
Hmm.
how they're going to end the game. The
Hmm.
game, Conte changes approach throughout.
Hmm.
He really coaches his teams.
Hmm.
He really
Hmm.
coaches them throughout, and
Hmm.
takes them on. Takes them through. Now I want you to defend deep. Now I want you to attack them. He really coaches them,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
minute for minute. Like, people joke that he thinks that these players are FIFA, that it's FIFA and he's controlling them with a controller. But that's how he is. He
Yeah.
really, that's how he coaches his teams. He really
Yeah.
wants them to change and follow his approach, and do
Hmm.
it as he says, depending
Hmm.
on the situation of the game. So I think it's going to be continued of that, but I do expect him to be much more aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I could have thought that he really feels he can control them. If he had that option, he would do. Gotham,
Oh,
you wanted
without a
to,
doubt.
yeah,
Without
yeah,
a doubt.
yeah. Gotham, did you have anything to ask about the predicted
Yeah,
11?
yeah. So Nima, like, what do you think would be our starting lineup? Do you think Sanchez will get a look in and Lautaro will be on the bench, or do you think we'll go with the same starting lineup bar Barella?
I think we'll see Ericsson, Brozovic, and Gagliardini, and
Hmm.
I think we'll see Alexis Sanchez.
Hmm.
That's my gut feeling. based on what I've heard. But at the end of the day, we have to wait and we have to wait for today's training session. We're recording this on a Friday, so we'll have to wait for today's training session and also tomorrow the press conference, what he says, because I think he'll wait. But I do expect to be. I mean, it's going to be Handanovic, Bastoni, Skriniar, De Vrij. It's going to be Hakimi and Ashley Young, or sorry, Hakimi. I think Darmian will play on the left wing back. I don't see him starting with Ashley Young third game in a row, and then Brozovic, and Christian Eriksen, and when you have that, then you can afford Gagliardini, I think. But I don't think you need to start Stefano Sensi, and I don't think Stefano Sensi should play right now. He's not in sync with the rest of this team, and therefore he shouldn't start. They should maybe bring him on later on, but I don't think he should start, not right now, because he showed that he's not in tune with the rest of them.
I just wanted to point out it's surprising how things change, because the last time he played Cagliari, Eriksen got a rare start and it was Sensi who came on and changed the game, and now the roles have been reversed. Just wanted to ask, is there any scope for Perisic starting, or he's not fit at all?
No, I don't think they'll risk him at all, because I mean, if it was a big game, maybe, but it's Cagliari, and I think they'll just let him recover in peace so that they don't make that situation any worse.
And Parmeshwar, coming to you, like, what do you think will be Calgary's lineup?
I think they have Cranio out with COVID, right? So he's not going to be there, and I think that's a blessing in disguise for us, because he gave us a hard time last time. But apart from that, they're expecting the main players like Nandes to start. I don't think Giovanni Simeone will start, but of course there's going to be João Pedro, Godin, Rugani, and Ragnar Klavan, and I think apart from that, Nainggolan and Alfred Duncan to cap it off. Yeah, Gautam.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Okay, so now for the predicted score, Parmeshwar, sticking with you, like, what do you think will be the score line?
Yeah, I think our winning run will continue, but I don't think it's going to be an easy match, because I think after what Nainggolan said, he always has a point to prove against Inter. I mean, he's always fired up. So I think it's going to be like a 2-1 win, or maybe even 1-0. I'm not too sure it's going to be like an overwhelming win for us. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm thinking 2-1, and I'm absolutely certain that Raja Nainggolan will score. There's no doubt in my mind that he will score. But I think Lukaku will score as well, and then I think one of the midfielders will score the winner.
What do you think?
2-1.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, what do you think?
I would add both of your Inter scores and then say we might win 4-1, because I think we're due a big win. I mean, I won't say 7-0 or 6-1 and stuff like that. I'll go for 4-1, because I think we are due, and I think Calgary is at the right moment. We are on a high, so I think it will be 4-1.
Just before we cap off, is there anything you want to plug, Nima? Anything you want to promote? Anything? The floor is yours for that.
No, it's just, we SempreInter.com is where we continue to cover Inter 24/7, and we also have our podcast Studio Inter and also the Studio Inter which is the Inter, and then the Italian football podcast which I'm a part of, which is more the Serie A as a whole. So check us out, and thank you for your support, you guys, and everyone else. It's
always a pleasure. I mean, the Studio Inter podcast is a great one, and we always listen to it for the latest things we can, and even the Italian football podcast. So thanks for coming on, Nima.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. So that's it for this episode. Please do like and subscribe for more regular content on Inter. We are also on other audio platforms. All the links will be given below. We'll also link Studio Inter links, and all other links for Nima will be available. And see you soon after the match. Forza Inter.
Yeah. Forza Inter.
All right.